What is going on, guys? Matt O'Leary here with another video. Today is going to be a fun one. I am excited to get into a little compare and contrast from the 2023 Jets to the 2010 Jets. This was an idea given to me on Twitter by 416 Jets. Thank you so much for the idea. I loved it. So I decided to take a look at both of the rosters. We'll go through position by position and kind of just talk about which one of these teams is better, which one of these rosters is better. And for most people, well, maybe not most, but for people my age, Jet fans in my demographic, the 2010 Jets were the best team that we've seen. Some were around for 98. I wish I was technically, but I was 3, so I don't remember the 98 Jets, unfortunately, even though they went 12-4 and went to the AFC Championship game. The 11-5 2010 New York Jets are the best team that I remember watching. So what I want to do is compare this roster to that one. Let's get started with the most important position in sports, the quarterback position. So Aaron Rodgers for the 2023 Jets versus Mark Sanchez for the 2010 Jets. Now, that is a massive, massive difference. To be fair, Mark Sanchez, I thought, played pretty well in his second year. He threw 17 touchdown passes. They were still a very much so run-heavy team, and they relied on that defense, which was still an elite defense. They had an amazing offensive line. We'll get into that in a little bit. But for as good as Mark Sanchez was as a game manager that year, not going to come close to the same stratosphere as Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers, even if he replicates what he did a year ago, that would be an upgrade over what Mark Sanchez was in that year in 2010, and just what he was as a quarterback for that team. His job was to manage the game and not make mistakes. In 2010, that was probably his best year of doing that. He did have some clutch moments and some comebacks, whether it was against the Houston Texans, a huge throw against the Colts in the playoffs. There were a lot of big moments for him that year, and my thought process was, okay, this guy's improving and this is going to be our answer at the position. Unfortunately, we know how that went. It kind of didn't improve beyond that. But for Aaron Rodgers, how much more do you really have to say there? The winner in that one is the current New York Jets, the 2023 Jets, with Aaron Rodgers at the helm. Now, looking at the running back position, this one was a little bit closer for me, but I think we still have a distinct winner. The 2023 Jets will have Hall, Carter, Abanikanda. If you want to throw Bam Knight in there, that's fine. 2010 Jets, Tomlinson, Green, McKnight. That was a really good running back room. None of them went for over 1,000 yards, but you had Tomlinson with 914 yards and 6 touchdowns, and Sean Green had 766 yards and 2 touchdowns. Now, what you saw out of Breece Hall, in a small sample size, was really impressive last year. 5.8 yards per carry, 4 touchdowns in 7 games. He has the highest ceiling of any of these guys, even over the 2010 version of LaDainian Tomlinson. Now, LT was no longer in his prime at that point. He played his final 2 years of his career with the New York Jets, but he was really good for them. He was a good role player for that team. I would still take the 2010 Jets as the winner here because I don't think Carter, Abanikanda, or Knight were as good as what Sean Green was for that team. So I think the current Jets, yes, they have a lot of depth and they might have the highest talent with Breece Hall, but I think that 2010 room was more proven, and that 1-2 punch was just frankly better than whatever the Jets are going to run out there with Hall and pick RB2, whichever one you would think is going to end up as RB2, whether it's Abanikanda, Carter, Bam Knight, one of those 3 guys as RB2. So I give the edge to the 2010 New York Jets in the running back room. Wide receiver, here we go. 2023, the current wide receiver room. You have Wilson, Lazard, Davis, Hardman, Cobb, really deep. In 2010, you had Edwards, Holmes, Cotchery, and Brad Smith as the 4 receivers. Edwards had a really nice year. Loved me some Braylon Edwards. 904 yards, 7 touchdowns. Holmes had 746 yards and 6 touchdowns in only 12 games. He missed the first 4 games of the year. This unit is not, as much as I love the 2010 Jets wide receivers, they are not nearly as deep as the current Jets, and they don't have anyone to Garrett Wilson's level. Garrett, as a rookie, went for over 1,100 yards. The Jets' leading receiver that year, Braylon Edwards, went for 900. I really, Edwards, Holmes, Cotchery, and Smith, they're some of my favorite Jets, right? Like, totally get it. But I think the 2023 Jets just are really, really deep. They have 5 guys who are reliable. And as I said, none of the 2010 guys have that same potential that Garrett Wilson have. And frankly, the ability that we saw already in year one, none of those guys were really at this point in their careers 1,100-yard receivers. So I'm going to have to give the edge to the current New York Jets in this one, but that's not to discredit that 2010 room. Love me some Jericho Cotchery, great role player, great Jet. Braylon Edwards, even though he only spent a short time with the New York Jets, really loved Braylon. And Antonio Holmes, especially that year, was excellent for the New York Jets. The tight end room. Okay, so the current tight end room for the 2023 Jets is Conklin, Uzama, Ruckert. They're 3 deep there. Gotta love that. In 2010, you had Dustin Keller, Hartstock, and Matt Mulligan as the 3 tight ends. Keller, I think, is the best of this bunch. He had this year 687 yards and 5 touchdowns. Conklin in 2022, 552 and 3. Uzama 232 and 2. The reason why I'm going to give the edge to the current Jets tight end room is because their number 2 and 3 are significantly better than the 2010 Jets. It was all Dustin Keller. Hartsock and Mulligan did not have any sort of factor or any sort of input on that season at all, while Uzama and Ruckert are going to have a role. And I think the gap between Keller and Conklin is close enough to where the depth makes up the difference. Again, I think Dustin, I would have a slight edge over Tyler Conklin, but it's not enough for me to not take into account just how bad the rest of that 2010 New York Jets offensive line room was. Hartstock and Mulligan versus Uzama and Ruckert. I'll take the 2023 unit over that. So winner 2023. All right, here we go. Let's compare the offensive lines. In 2023, the projected offensive line is Brown, Tomlinson, Tippmann, AVT, Becton, and I put Becton / Mitchell / Turner. In 2010, the Jets ran out to Brickashaw Ferguson, Matt Slauson, Nick Mangold, Brandon Moore, and Damian Woody. They were the best offensive line in football in 2009. They lost to Alan Faneca, and even with Matt Slauson being inserted there at guard over Alan Faneca after, Faneca's career was over, the 2010 Jets offensive line was, if not the number 1 offensive line in football, I think it was. It was a top 3 offensive line. The 2023 Jets, the current Jets, they have potential, but that line I don't think can compare. AVT is great. Brown is a serviceable left tackle. Tippmann, you hope, is great. Becton, you hope, is bouncing back, but there's a lot of unknown with the current offensive line. And just how could you not pick that dominant unit from really 2008 through 2010, 2011? That offensive line was just so good and so dominant. There's no one as much as I love AVT, there is no one on the level of Mangold or DeBrickashaw Ferguson. Can AVT eventually get to that point? You hope so, absolutely. But the Ferguson and Mangold were just so dominant, and the veterans in Woody and Moore on the other side were just excellent. So I think the winner has to be 2010 in this one. To the defensive side of the ball we go. We'll start with the defensive line. In 2023, the Jets have a deep unit. JFM, Quinnen, Jefferson, Lawson, JJ, Woods, Huff, McDonald, Thomas. That is Solomon Thomas. A really, really nice unit. As for the 2010 Jets, they had Sean Ellis, Sione Puha, Brian Thomas, Mike DeVito, Jason Taylor, Calvin Pace. Pretty good defensive line, but they don't have nearly the depth that the 2023 defensive line has. So I'm going to give the edge to 2023. You guys know I love Sean Ellis. He's one of my favorite Jets of all time. Sione Puha was a nice role player. Same with Mike DeVito, kind of put that in the same spot. Brian Thomas was a steady Eddie player. Jason Taylor, weird to have on that team. I don't know. Jason Taylor as a New York Jet was just bizarre. And Calvin Pace, same thing, kind of like a steady guy. Vernon Golston, fortunately, swing and a miss. If he was anything close to what they were hoping to get from him, that I think that Jets defense is just even on another level. But how could you not give the edge to the current unit? I don't think there's someone on the level of Quinnen Williams on that 2010 New York Jets team. And again, as much as I love, like Sean Ellis, my guy, love him, great Jet. but this 2023 unit is better. That's one of the Jets' biggest strengths right now is the defensive line, so they get the edge. At linebacker, okay, compare and contrast the linebacker rooms in 2023. You'll have Mosley and Williams as your starter with Sherwood and Barnes for depth. In 2010, you're looking at David Harris and Bart Scott as the starting duo. Mosley is great. Obviously, we know what he was last year. He's a really solid player. Williams is coming along. He's improving, but Harris and Scott combined for 181 tackles, and they were just so steady for those teams. I think that's probably the best linebacking core that I saw was when those two guys were going. And I know Bart Scott was, a veteran at that point in his career. It was late in his, NFL career, but Harris and Scott, that starting duo, I think is significantly better than Mosley and Williams. Even though that's not to discredit Mosley. He's a great leader. He's a really, really good football player, but give me the 2010 New York Jets linebackers having the edge with Bart Scott and David Harris at that position. Cornerback room. Okay, this was really, really tough for me to do, the corners. So in 2023, Sauce, DJ Reed, Carter, Hall, Eccles is their corner room. For 2010, you had Revis, Cromartie, Lowry, Coleman, and Kyle Wilson. To me, this came down to the number 2 corner as what was what the biggest thing to differentiate the two. Revis and Sauce were close enough to me that I was going to leave it up to the number 2 corner. And you know what? I also think Carter II's a better player than Dwight Lowry. As much as I like Dwight Lowry, he was a good New York Jet as well. We know Kyle Wilson really wasn't. And Coleman was kind of trending downwards at that point in his career. But specifically, DJ Reed versus Antonio Cromartie was the biggest difference for me. Crow let up 7 touchdowns that year in 2010 and 645 receiving yards compared to DJ Reed last year, who had 467 and 2 touchdowns. So I think as good as Crow was, and believe me, he was getting picked on significantly more because of what Darrelle Revis did the year before and that year. I think DJ Reed's a better number 2 corner and closer to being a number 1, at least at this point in their careers, or at this point when Cromartie was playing for the Jets. So I'm going to take the 2023 Jets cornerback room over the 2010 Jets cornerback room, which seems crazy because it's like, how could you take a corner room that has Darrelle Revis or not take a corner room that has Darrelle Revis in it? But I think the 2023 unit has the edge for me. The safety room. Okay, 2023, Jordan Whitehead, Adrian Amos, Tony Adams versus Jim Leonard, Poole, Eric Smith, Coleman. They had a bunch of different guys in there. Whitehead should, you would think, bounce back. Amos should, I would think, still be okay. But give me the 2010 Jets with some depth. You also had James Ahedabu in there. I didn't list him, but I think the starting duo of Leonard and Poole is going to be better than the Whitehead and Amos duo. It's probably closer than some would like to think, but I think Jim Leonard and Poole, with the depth that they had beyond that, also makes a difference. The Jets don't have a ton behind the 2 starters. They like Tony Adams a lot, but that is still very much so an unknown at this point in his career. So give me the 2010 Jets. And then finally, we round out the comparison with special teams. So I'm not going to go like kicker versus kicker, punter versus punter, returners versus returner. We'll just loop special teams together. So the 2023 Jets will have Zerline, Morstead, and TBD as the returner. It's unknown, but you could project or predict either Mecole Hardman, Bam Knight, maybe Izzy Abanikanda gets in the mix there. They have a few different options at returner, but the 2010 Jets, they had Folk, Steve Weatherford, Brad Smith, and Jim Leonard as their returners that year. I don't know how you don't go with the 2010 Jets. Nick Folk was a really good Jets kicker for a long time. Weatherford versus Morstead is pretty close, but Brad Smith, elite level returner, an elite level kick returner. He had over 1,000 yards and 2 touchdowns returning. And Jim Leonard was a solid punt returner. We don't really know yet who the kick returner and punt returner for the 2023 Jets are going to be, but maybe that's unfair, but I don't think they're going to be at the same level as, either Smith or Jim Leonard was for those teams. So I'm going to say 2010 is the winner there. Now, doing the compare, we went through, a winner by position. It actually splits out even, 5-5 apiece. So the 2023 Jets have the edge at quarterback, wide receiver, tight end, defensive line, and cornerback. The 2010 Jets have the edge at running back, offensive line, linebacker, safety, and special teams. So it is 5 and 5 apiece. Now, the fun exercise is if these teams were to play against each other, who would win? Tough to say. Very, very tough to say. And again, probably the 2010 Jets are my favorite Jets team that I've seen. But I would think the 2023 Jets would have the edge because of the upgrade at the positions they're better at. Quarterback, wide receiver, defensive line, and corner, I think is more important to be better at. The 2010 Jets having the edge at offensive line is a big thing, obviously. But linebacker, safety, running back, that doesn't have as much value to me as quarterback, wide receiver, defensive line, and even if throwing in cornerback in the mix. So I would think that it would be a good matchup. I'm not saying like, oh, the 2023 Jets run away with it, or oh, the 2020 or the 2010 Jets run away with it. I don't think so. I think it's close, but I think I would give the slight edge to 2023 because of the quarterback upgrade being what it is, wide receiver upgrade being what it is, and the defensive line and cornerback room. So let me know your thoughts on the compare and contrast between the last time the Jets made the playoffs in 2010 to the current roster. That's going to do it for me. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am Matt. I'll catch you next time.